Welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show. Join us now. Very happy to see Elie Mystal, the nation's justice correspondent and columnist, the Alfred Nobler Fellow at the Type Media Center, author of two books, which we covered both on this show, bestseller Allow Me to Retort, and The Black Guy's Guide to the Constitution and Bad Laws. Elie, it is nice to see you, my friend. How was the State of the Union?
Dean,
What would you say?
Dean, one of the reasons why I scheduled with you after the State of the Union is that I needed to give myself a reason to continue living after it. Like I knew I was going to need some reason to not jump off my roof during the State of the Union. Look, I've said this before. The Trump administration is an evil, racist, white supremacist organization, right? And sometimes you get the full kind of Klan hood unmasked version of that, right? But they're also bumbling, crass idiots. And sometimes you get more of that, just the clownish stupidity of the administration, right? And I thought that on balance, the State of the Union was more in the clownish, crass stupidity than the pure, unvarnished evil. There was a lot of evil there, right, but it was kind of subsumed in this, like I said on Blue Sky, it was like the worst version of the Jerry Springer show you ever saw, right? It was reveals and come on down, here's your uncle, right? It was handing out medals. He was doing all of this kind of crass, unbecoming of a president for sure, behavior, but you got more of the clownishness last night than the pure, unvarnished evil.
And they should have done a DNA test. And the baby is yours. Oh my God, I can't believe it. Look at that.
I was waiting to see who Barron's real father is, right? Like I thought that was what was coming next.
There are a bunch of members of Tony Gonzalez, the Republican, who's on, in the middle of the controversy because his staffer he had an affair with his staffer, and then she lit herself on fire and sadly killed herself. And he's staying in because what Republican has an affair with a staffer who lit themselves on fire? I mean, that's the least of us to throw the stones. But this is, I think it's very interesting the way you put it. Certain things stood out for me. Al Green, I think, is such a brave person who, again, this time had to sign Black people are not apes. He didn't have that sign last time. He demanded impeachment last time. They threw him out. This time, and what was interesting, like Troy Nels and some Republicans tried to grab the sign from his hand. They were so angry that this Black man who was so uppity that he would hold a sign up to the white supremacist leader to his face for something that he posted.
Yep. Like Al Green, as you say, he's an amazing person. He's an amazing fighter. And the thing that really got me about that, it's such a simple statement. Who disagrees with that? Oh, the people kicking him out of the House disagreed with that. The people trying to rip the sign out of his hands disagree with that. They don't like to be confronted with their own racism in their face, and that's what Al Green did last night. We take it for granted that you get kicked. There's no reason for him to be kicked out of Congress for that. He wasn't disrupting anything. He was holding a sign. Like that should be legal in the people's house. There's no reason for him to get kicked out. We just take it for granted, and there was this moment, the only moments that I thought was really impactful last night was when Trump was talking about Iran, basically trying to justify his coming war with that country. And he was like, well, they've killed their own protesters. And it was such a yeah, where have I heard that before? And Ilhan Omar, who honestly is just one of the bravest people in the country, starts shouting, you kill your own protesters, you kill Americans, right? Like that is what he does. And we have just, I think too many of us take for granted some of the fascism and the authoritarianism that is endemic to this administration and the Republican Party. And it needs to be called out. You need Ilhan Omar there to point out that when Trump is talking about foreign dictators killing protesters, that's exactly what the Trump administration is doing and has done.
Absolutely. And I wrote, for my Substack, for what it's worth, and talked about it on the show, because I will never let go of this, that in Brazil and in South Korea, their leaders who attempted a coup are in prison right now. South Korea, he gets sentenced to life, but he's been in jail since they charged him months ago. And Bolsonaro is serving 27 years. While in America, if you attempt a coup, you get to do the State of the Union in the same building that your people attacked to keep you in power. And it's such a joke, this idea that we're exceptional and the other countries are banana republic. Well, in those other countries, they take their democracy so seriously, they put people in prison for the rest of their lives who are attempting a coup. In America, it's bullshit, and corporate media doesn't even talk about it anymore like it's yesterday's news, when it is yesterday's news, but that's the guy standing in the same building whereas people attacked it. I think that's kind of relevant.
Yes, Dean, I also hate Merrick Garland. I also wonder, like look, there's so much water under the bridge with that guy. But the fact that Trump is able to give a State of the Union represents already a complete failure of American democracy. That man should never have been allowed to run again. He should be in jail for his attempts to overthrow the government instead of sitting there for 2 hours handing medals and hamburgers to the U.S. hockey team, which, by the way, debased themselves by going to that event. I mean, I know the U.S. men's hockey team has decided to be pro-MAGA and pro-political, but I thought they really debased themselves by standing up for that dog and pony show. You notice the U.S. women's hockey team, which also won a gold medal, did
No,
not
they
debase
said,
themselves for the short glazing of Trump at the State of the Union. But I thought the men's hockey team did themselves a disservice when by
I
showing
agree.
up.
And,
I
I
also
want,
thought that it was
sure.
interesting that only three Supreme Court members showed up. There was this during the press conference after he lost the big tariff case. There was this. I don't want to call her a reporter. It's one of these people who has been allowed to pretend that they are a journalist for the purposes of asking Trump softball questions. And during the press conference, she asked Trump if the Supreme Court justices would still be invited to his State of the Union. And it made me pull my hair out because A, it's not his State of the Union. B, it is Congress that invites the president to the State of the Union, not the president who invites other people to the people's house. Like, that's not how it works. So it's just, that question was insane to me. But after calling the Supreme Court sleazebags and slime balls and whatever, only three justices showed up: Roberts, Kagan, and Sotomayor. I thought that was Roberts, Kagan, and Kavanaugh. I thought that was interesting. I know four. Barrett was there too. I thought that was interesting, and there was a point where Trump directly refers to John Roberts, talking about the SAVE Act, his attempts to stop mail-in voting. He turns directly to John Roberts and says, "We got to stop it, John." And I'm just, this is not how it's supposed to work. John Roberts threw a hissy fit when Barack Obama criticized Citizens United during one of his State of the Unions,
Mhm.
but he's just going to sit there and take it from Donald Trump. It's Roberts is. I cannot emphasize enough how much of a weak, sniveling man John Roberts is, and how hypocritical he is given his treatment of Barack Obama versus his treatment of Donald Trump.
Yeah, and the decision, and we'll touch on the tariffs decision now. I mean, look, he did the right thing in ruling the way he did, but he'll do the wrong thing in gutting the Voting Rights Act when we're waiting for that decision any day. And when the SAVE Act, if it passes the Senate, I'm not sure if it will, but if it does, it'll be challenged immediately. And I imagine, unless I'm wrong somehow, and I could be, that he will uphold the SAVE Act, even though the state should have this power. But let's talk about the tariff. You wrote an article, A Giant Mess Behind the Supreme Court's Tariffs Ruling for the Nation. And so tell us about the mess, your view of the mess.
Yeah, so first of all, when you say he did the right thing for his business cronies, right? Like the way to understand the Supreme Court is always to follow the money. And the
Mhm.
only times we've seen the Supreme Court stand up to Trump in any significant way is when their money is at stake, right? It's in the Fed case with the firing of the Fed Reserve chair Lisa Cook. Like Trump is probably going to lose that because that affects the entire economy. That affects John Roberts' 401k, and John Roberts doesn't like it when you touch his 401k. So it's like the business community still has rights. The business community still has a Supreme Court. The rest of us don't. And that's really how to understand the difference, right? Technically, legally, the jargon of it all involved this issue called the major questions doctrine. And the reason why
Mhm.
I wrote about it is because it is something that the Republicans have made up. It is not a thing that I learned in law school. It's not a thing that the Republicans sitting on the court learned in law school because it was made up after they graduated from law school, right?
Hmm.
And the idea behind this doctrine is that any action the president takes of economic or political significance cannot be done without the explicit approval of Congress. What is a matter of significance? Only the Supreme Court knows. What constitutes clear and precise language from Congress? Only the Supreme Court knows. And so it's another one of these ideas where the Supreme Court says it's giving power back to Congress, but really the Supreme Court is taking all of the power away from Congress, and in this case, away from the president as well, away from the people that we vote for, and giving it to themselves because only they can know what a major question is or not. The reason why the tariffs case fell the way it did is because the Republicans couldn't agree on how to apply their made-up rule, right? It's the problem with fiction, right? Like some people say Jedis can jump really high. Other people say Jedis can fly. Who can know? It depends on who's writing the next script, right? Like,
Right.
and in this case, Neil Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett and Brett Kavanaugh and John Roberts all disagreed about the major fiction that they're inventing, and so they couldn't come to a consensus. The liberals held firm. The liberals were just like, you know what? We don't need major questions for this. It's just straight up. It's a statutory interpretation issue.
Right.
Trump doesn't have the power. We don't have to. And because the liberals held firm, the Supreme Court couldn't get their ducks. The Republicans couldn't get their ducks in a row to force this fiction down on the tariffs case.
So, some people have tried to read, including myself, is this going to rein in? Are they ready to rein Trump in if he doesn't have the express power, nothing implied, because they have concerns about it, or it's nothing of that sort whatsoever? Where do you come down?
Depends on how much money is involved.
So that's really the bottom line.
I think it's a straight money question. If money is on the table, then they will rein Trump in. If it's just people's rights, they won't. The only exception, so much of this comes down to April 1st. April Fool's Day is the day that the Supreme Court has decided to hear the birthright citizenship case. And there is nothing that tells me that Trump can win this, other than the fact that people like Sam Alito and Clarence Thomas think Trump is a God king, right? Like, I can't see a version of events where Trump doesn't lose this 7-2 unless he wins, right? And so, like, I do think that Trump will lose birthrights. You cannot change an amendment to the Constitution by executive fiat. You just can't do that. But we'll see. We'll see on April 1st. I will know so much more about if this court is serious about anything in the Constitution after April 1st.
And you wonder, is there a chance they took it and they're going to rule against Trump to try to say, look, we stand up to him on occasion? Because
I think that's what I look. Look, even in the tariffs case, every time the Supreme Court puts out a decision that isn't completely fascist and authoritarian, Republicans come out of the woodwork, right? The Republicans, it's like the cicada tree, right? Time for me to say, the Supreme Court is so reasonable and the guardrails are holding and the institutions have they all show up. They all showed up for the tariffs case. If he loses birthright citizenship, the same people, Sarah Isgur, the same people will show up again. See, the Supreme Court is super reasonable. There is that aspect here where every time the Supreme Court does something that's not completely horrible, it gives legitimacy to all of the horrible things the Supreme Court does. I'm beyond the point, Dean, of caring about that. I don't care what CNN, what Bari Weiss is going to say about the Supreme Court. I know what they're doing. And so all I care about at this point is, will they allow Trump to wreck absolutely everything? And again, I'll know more about that after April 1st. And honestly, the birthright citizenship case, Dean, it's one of the few cases where I don't know what's going to happen before it happens, right? Most of the time, these guys with this court, I'm like Miss Cleo, man. I can see Brett Kavanaugh coming 8 miles away. I know what he's going to have for breakfast. I know what he's going to have for lunch. I know what he's going to have for dinner. Tariff case, I don't know. Tariff case, I have to actually listen to what they say and wait for their actual ruling
Right.
before I know what's going to
You
happen.
said tariff case, but you meant
I meant, sorry, birthright
No,
citizenship.
that's
I
right.
don't know.
By the way, so where do you see the voting rights case, the Louisiana case?
Oh, we totally lost that. No, that's 6-3. Voting Rights Act is dead. Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act is dead. They are going to rule against black people voting rights. The open issue there is when they do it, right? Because there's this case called the Purcell case, the Purcell principle, it's now called, that says you can't change voting rules too close to an election. How close is too close? Only the Supreme Court knows. According to Brett Kavanaugh a couple of years ago, too close is February before a November election, right? But Kavanaugh's a fat hypocrite, so who knows if we're in that Purcell window or not. So the issue with the voting rights case is not whether or not we're going to lose. We're going to lose. But when we lose, right? Because if we lose in June, that's probably too late for them to change the maps in front of the midterms. That if we lose in June, that's a 2028 problem. If we lose tomorrow, I mean, there were decisions today. I was worried about it today, right? If we had lost today, that might have been enough time for them to change the maps before the midterm elections. So it really comes down to not if we're going to lose, we're going to lose. The question is when we lose, and if that allows the Republican legislatures enough time to rig the midterms for Republicans to hang on to the House.
Well, they will. I'm sure they're preparing now. It's just a question if you're right because the first primaries are next week in Illinois and certain states, and every week in March it's like boom, a whole bunch. So you'll have primary districts that'll all have to be shifted, and not all of them, some of them will, but if
it comes, I don't see how they can change the maps after the primaries have started. But again, I live in a world based on rules, right? It's like I'm a Newtonian physicist in a quantum world, man. Like there are rules that I understand, and the Supreme Court just doesn't follow those rules all the time anymore. So we have to wait and see. But yeah, I intellectually speaking, it's very hard for them to change the maps after the primaries have started, and that's March, baby. So like if this comes out late March, that should be too late, but we don't know.
I hope they hold it to June or July. So Elie, there was another case yesterday that didn't get a lot of press, but a racist postal worker didn't want to deliver mail anymore to black people, and Clarence Thomas wrote an opinion going, that's okay, do whatever you want, 5-4. And it's an interesting case because it's really interpreting the Federal Tort Claims Act. But you tell me, share a little if you could about this case of what jumped out.
I'm so glad you asked me this question, Dean. And I just want to say to your listeners, this is why you need to listen to Dean's show, right? Because this is a critically important case that's getting completely overlooked because of the tariffs, because of the State of the Union, because of everything else going on. Yes, at core, a racist post office in Dallas, Texas, right, refused to deliver mail to a black woman landlord for no particular reason except for perhaps the fact that she's black. Like they just would not deliver her mail or her tenant's mail, making it almost impossible for her to run her business. So she sued, and because she lives in Texas, it got up to the Fifth Circuit, and she lost almost all of her claims, including the racial discrimination claim. And the only claim that survived was this claim under what's called the Federal Tort Claims Act, which allows you to sue the government. Normally, you can't sue the government for torts. Right. But under this act, it allows you to sue the government for intentional malfeasance by government officials, right? So if the government intentionally does something to you, you're allowed to sue them, right? So, okay, they intentionally weren't delivering her mail, right? So this is something that she should be allowed to sue for, right? But there's an exception called the Postal exception that says you can't sue the government for loss, miscarriage, or negligent transmission of mail. And to take all the jargon out of that, what it basically means is that you can't sue the post office just because they lost your Christmas cards, right? Like that's we're not running to court every time somebody doesn't get a holiday greeting, right?
Right.
This woman couldn't get her bills. This landlord couldn't have her tenants get their rent checks, right? This is not a Christmas card, right? But Clarence Thomas 5-4, says that intentionally refusing to deliver the mail to a black woman is perfectly fine and part of the exception, and the government cannot be sued or held accountable for refusing, not losing, not accident, for intentionally not delivering your mail. And the reason why this is so important is not just because it's another issue of racial discrimination against black people. I'm almost glossing over the racial discrimination against black people. The reason why this is so important is because if the post office can refuse to deliver your mail, guess what? The post office can also refuse to deliver your ballot. Right? If it cannot deliver a black landlady's mail, it cannot deliver a black landlady's ballot on purpose, according to Clarence Thomas. And he makes this decision 6 months ahead of the midterm elections, one day, on the same day that Donald Trump stands up there and tells John Roberts, we have to stop mail-in balloting, right? Who joined Thomas in that 5-4 decision? Oh, it was John Roberts, right? Mm-hmm. So like that is the thing that people are missing here. The post office now has the green light from the Supreme Court to not deliver mail-in ballots on purpose.
And that's the big thing, the intentional. The court said the intentional non-delivery of mail. So, okay, so if someone can't sue the post office, is there any other recourse you can think of to compel them or to hold them accountable? Because I can't, because it really seems like this is a green light for every postal worker to throw every mail. They could be like, oh, this is your ballot, and they just throw in the garbage right there. There's nothing you can do about it. That literally, it's like
remember, the Fifth Circuit dismissed her racial discrimination claims, right? And so the Supreme Court didn't rule on the racial discrimination claim. Arguably, if the post office refuses to deliver the mail for an entire black-ass zip code, right? Like all the mail in Harlem, for some reason, doesn't get delivered to the elections. Like you might be able to revive a racial discrimination claim. That's a lot harder. And, it's really hard to prove to the Supreme Court that people are being racist to you. I can imagine John Roberts saying, white people have gentrified Harlem too, and just saying no racial discrimination that he can see. Like it's a harder case to make the racist case over the intentional malfeasance case. But the court just said, you're not allowed to make the intentional malfeasance case. So I've talked about this online. I've written about this, Dean. There's a very thin edge here where you don't want to oversell the chances of Trump rigging the midterm elections because it depresses voter turnout. You don't want people to feel like their votes aren't going to matter, so why should they show up anyway? However, if you don't talk seriously about the direct and obvious attempts Trump and the MAGA party have made to pre-rig this election, then you get caught flat-footed when they do it, right? Like this is not like a fantasy. This is not hyperbole. Steve Bannon is talking about having ICE patrolling polling stations in areas where they don't want black people to vote. He has armed ICE to the hilt. We know that they're going to be out there on election day. So you're cutting off you're potentially suppressing the ability of people to vote in person. Now you're suppressing the ability of people to vote by mail. You have the legal structure in place under the guise of J.D. Vance and the special attorneys that they announced at the State of the Union. You have the people in place potentially to seize ballots from precincts that Trump doesn't want to have those votes counted from. They put the legal people in place to seize those ballots, to seize those voting machines. There's a lot of smoke here suggesting that the fire underneath is a rigged midterm election. I don't think that this upcoming election will be free and fair. I think you'd be an idiot to think that it would be. Now, can you overcome them with overwhelming turnout? Yes, which is why there's a thin edge when talking about this. The only way really to overcome them is with overwhelming turnout. Right. But if it's a close election, they have already put in place everything they need to rig it.
It's very much true. And you have that balance where you don't want people to feel like it's futile. Why should I even go and vote? Where the opposite is true. If we turn out big, even the gerrymandering in Texas, the margins of the new districts aren't really great for them, and they're based on old elections. That's based on a different model. You blow that model out.
They're based on a model of Latinos continuing to drift towards the right. If Latinos break hard, I mean, this has been true for the past 20 years. If Latinos voted like Black people, there would not be a Republican elected to statewide office anywhere outside of like Montana and North Dakota, right? Like that's just the Republicans could not win if Latinos voted like Black people. If Latinos voted for Democrats like they voted for Democrats during the Obama administration, Republicans can't win most places, including those districts in Texas. So it really comes down to both Latino turnout and how Latinos break. If they break 60-40 Democrats, even those districts in Texas are blue districts. The gerrymanders are based on a model of Latino right-wing slippage. If that doesn't happen,
great point. I know that someone would look at. So before I let you go, Elie, where do you want people to follow you now? What's the best place? Is it Blue Sky? I think.
Oh God, So yeah, I'm not on Apartheid X. I can't.
Right.
I can't anymore. I just can't. I
understand.
Can't. So yeah, I'm mainly on Blue Sky, and I write now twice a week for The Nation, and people can find me there.
All right, Elie.
And on your show. I'm always on your show.
I like it. I'd love you to be on even more. It's great seeing you. You sound great, even though I know you're overcoming a flu. And I look forward to chatting with you, brother. Thanks so much for being on.
All right.